On whether or not he will spare the life of convicted quadruple murderer Stanley Tookie Williams. It's a case that's captured national headlines primarily because of Williams' famous supporters, many from the entertainment world. NBC's James Hattori joins us tonight from outside San Quentin Prison in California. Good evening, James.
Good evening, John. Governor Schwarzenegger is presumably still weighing his options in this case. There was no announcement today. Meantime, Williams' attorney has filed an 11th hour appeal asking the state Supreme Court to delay the execution. At Los Angeles churches this morning, community leaders concerned about violence breaking out on the streets
Nobody in here is going to start a riot.
Called for restraint and understanding in the hours leading up to Williams' scheduled execution.
We're asking them to show responsibility as well as concern for our community. We don't want anyone hurt. We don't want any rioting in our community.
Yesterday, Williams' lawyer asked the California Supreme Court for a last-minute delay. Williams, a co-founder of the notorious L.A. street gang, the Crips, was convicted of killing 4 people in 1979, though he maintains his innocence.
Everything is predicated on hearsay from individuals with irreparable backgrounds, facing capital punishment themselves or other murders or what have you.
Williams' lawyers argue that prosecutors failed to disclose that one of the witnesses against him was not a U.S. citizen and had a violent criminal history, which prevented them from arguing that witness might have been the real killer.
What they're trying to show is that Stanley Williams did not receive a fair trial because he was not allowed to argue that someone else committed these murders and that he was denied his due process rights because of that ruling.
The bigger issues facing Governor Schwarzenegger: has Tookie Williams rehabilitated himself by denouncing violence, encouraging a gang truce, and writing children's books? And is there a lingering doubt about the validity of his murder convictions?
And I will be reading and doing all the research on it so we make the right decision.
That decision is now likely to come tomorrow as preparations for Williams' execution go forward. He's scheduled to die by lethal injection 1 minute after midnight Tuesday morning. John?
NBC's James Hattori reporting. James, thank you. Still to come on NBC Nightly News this Sunday, who is behind the suicide bombings in Iraq? On the trail of terror for foreign fighters. That story coming up in depth. And later, staying safe from spyware. Some tips for your children and your computer.
Good evening, I'm Diane Dwyer. The California Supreme Court tonight rejected an appeal for convicted murderer Stanley Tookie Williams. It refused to grant a stay of execution. That decision means Williams will be executed at 12:01 Tuesday morning unless the governor grants clemency or a federal appeal succeeds. NBC 11's Susan Strabo is here now with a look at why the governor is taking so much time deciding the clemency question. Susan?
Diane, clemency is rare in California. The last request granted was by Ronald Reagan nearly 40 years ago. Schwarzenegger has already denied 2 other clemency requests during his tenure. Tonight, Williams supporters say they won't rest until they do everything they can to help him.
At Los Angeles churches today, community leaders expressed concern about violence breaking out on the streets if Stanley Tookie Williams is executed.
Nobody in here is going to start a riot.
They're asking for understanding.
We're asking them to show responsibility as well as concern for our community. We don't want anyone hurt. We don't want any rioting in our community.
In San Francisco at an NAACP event, death penalty opponent Sister Helen Prejean, who wrote the book Dead Man Walking, asked the governor to spare Williams' life.
I think Governor Schwarzenegger's faced with this decision, that here's a man who's changed his life.
And late this afternoon, Williams advocates announced someone had come forward who may help exonerate the death row inmate. They streamed video of the witness reading a statement on the Save Tookie website.
Have you had the opportunity to review this declaration?
His affidavit has been sent to the governor's office, according to Williams' supporters. Meanwhile, there's no word on where Governor Schwarzenegger stands in his decision-making process.
You know, we're talking about a real big vacuum right now. Nobody knows what's inside there. It's an extraordinarily lonely experience for the governor.
NBC 11 political analyst Larry Gersten says from a strategic point of view, the governor would likely deny clemency since most Californians approve of the death penalty. But politics aside, it's a decision he'll have to live with forever.
In the end, I'm not so sure that the governor is going to be as political about this issue as those around him might think. It's a very lonely, miserable decision. It's the one decision governors don't want to have to make because it's so final.
Now, one of Williams' advocates said she visited with him today, and he told her that whatever happens, he is at peace with the situation. Susan Saravo, NBC 11 News.
Susan, thank you. San Quentin Prison, by the way, has 650 death row inmates. That's more than any other prison in the country. A team of guards is now watching Williams for any unusual activity and records his behavior every 15 minutes. Today, crews cleaned and prepared the death chamber as well. Recent polls show about 2/3 of Californians support the death penalty. But in January, the Assembly is expected to hold a hearing on a bill that would suspend any executions until 2009. Police in the quiet East Bay.
A big crowd is starting to gather outside the San Quentin prison tonight. This is a look from Chopper 11. We have crews across the state with reaction. NBC 11's Garvin Thomas is in Sacramento. Ethan Harp and Christian Captain are at San Quentin. We begin tonight with Christian.
Well, good evening. Right now, we can tell you that protesters are beginning to show up here at the gates of San Quentin, and they are hoping for a miracle. Take a look. You can see some of the signs back there, and the crowd certainly has grown in the last hour or so. Those protesters are hoping, like I said, for a miracle. Williams' lawyers are asking the governor to reconsider his decision to let Williams die in light of what they're calling new evidence. Meanwhile, they're also appealing to the United States Supreme Court, hoping the highest court in the land will do something to save Williams' life. For most of the day, only a few protesters gathered at the gates of San Quentin, still hoping Stanley Tookie Williams' life will be spared. 12:30 this afternoon, Governor Schwarzenegger's office emailed their message denying clemency for Williams. The Reverend Jesse Jackson, one of Williams' visitors today, learned live on television when an assistant held up a notebook. As to the question of whether Williams has any realistic chances now,
I don't think so. The governor had that power, and apparently has made the decision. I kind of feel that the hearing last week was a ruse.
At that clemency hearing, prosecutors argued there was no doubt Williams killed 4 people in 1979 and should pay the price.
The evidence in this case is truly overwhelming, and that the murders were senseless, they were very brutal, and that Mr. Williams should pay the ultimate penalty for his crimes.
Williams has steadfastly denied committing the murders that sent him to death row. And the Crips co-founder has become an outspoken gang critic. Visitors like Jackson say he is at peace with his fate.
He said, I feel good. I feel at peace with myself. I've been in the valley, in the shadow of death before, and so I stand at this moment, he said, without fear.
The last of Williams' visitors are scheduled to leave right about now. Williams will be moved to a cell near the death chamber, where he will have one last chance for life.
We will make one last final call to see if there's any stays from the courts or from the governor's office. Just a real simple process.
Now, in just the last 2 minutes, we've received notice from the governor's office that they have denied Williams' request for a reprieve. So at this point, everything appears to be on track for Stanley Williams to die at 1 minute after midnight tonight. Late today, Williams also reversed himself on a decision that he had made earlier. Previously, he had said that he did not want any friends or family to attend tonight's execution. Earlier today, we learned that he has, in fact, asked for some of his friends and acquaintances to attend tonight's execution. For now, reporting live at San Quentin, Christian Captain, NBC 11 News.
Preparations for Williams' execution are underway this evening as the clock winds down to midnight. NBC 11's Ethan Harp is live at San Quentin, where he spoke with prison officials about the final hours before an execution, and he joins us live with the details. Ethan.
And Lisa, we'll pick up where Christian left off. As he said, those last visitors should have been escorted out moments ago. We are told things are running on schedule, so for much of the rest of the evening, it will be just him and the guards. At any time, he will be moved from a visitation cell to what is called the Death Watch cell. That sits right next to the execution chamber. At 7:15 tonight, he will be offered his last opportunity for a last meal. So far, he has declined that meal. The cell will include a small television, a radio, and if he wants to read any documents, he can request them, and they will be brought to him. Then at 11:30 p.m., witnesses will be brought in as Williams is strapped down to the table. At that point, after he is strapped down, a curtain will open, revealing both Williams and the witnesses to each other. Now, despite all the attention, both around the world and just outside these gates, prison spokespeople say for them, this execution is being treated no different from others.
Yes, everything is proceeding according to plan. The staff here are very professional. They have the experience and the training to carry out executions in a dignified and professional manner.
Now, as is standard policy, anytime there's an execution, the entire population, the inmate population here in San Quentin, is on lockdown. We are told Williams today received some 50 pieces of mail, correspondence, packages, small packages. Those are being searched right now, and then if Williams wants to spend the evening looking through those, he can do so. If the execution takes place, spokespeople tell us, based on past experience, it takes about 20 minutes for the lethal combination of drugs to take effect before the inmate is pronounced dead. Live at San Quentin, Ethan Harp, NBC 11 News.
Members of several civil rights organizations opposing the death penalty gathered in San Francisco just after the governor's decision. Some representatives called on a moratorium for executions. Others pointed the blame at the governor for not stopping the execution and bowing to politics.
Governor Schwarzenegger's decision to kill Stanley Williams is a shameful failure of leadership and a collapse of moral courage. It is politics as usual by one who claims to be above such cowardly power-mongering. And the question is, how are we made safer by this mindless, brutal act?
A member of Amnesty International added that he's upset over the tone of the governor's clemency statement.
Pleas from Hollywood stars and a petition with 50,000 signatures was not enough to convince the governor to grant clemency for Williams. NBC 11's Garvin Thomas is in Sacramento tonight with the reasons behind Schwarzenegger's decision. Garvin?
Alan, the governor made no public appearances today, so we never got the chance to ask him directly why he made the decision he did. What we were left with is 6 pages of written decision as to why he made that decision. First and foremost in there, we learned that the governor believes Stanley Tookie Williams is guilty. He says 24 years of trials and appeals support that fact. He says, quote, there is no reason to disturb the judicial decisions that uphold the jury's decisions that he is guilty of these 4 murders and should pay with his life. This matters in the case for clemency because, as the governor writes, without an apology and atonement for these senseless killings, there can be no redemption. And redemption is what Williams and his supporters have been banking on to save this very controversial life.
Convicted murderer or innocent man? Gang leader or peace activist? Role model or con artist? Many people look at Stanley Tookie Williams and see many different things. No wonder, then, so many disagree whether he should live or die. Stanley Williams was born in Louisiana, but raised in South Central Los Angeles, where he later co-founded the notorious Crips street gang. On the night of February 27, 1979, 4 men robbed a Pico Rivera 7-Eleven. The clerk, Albert Owens, was shot twice in the back and killed. The shotgun used to kill Owens belonged to Stanley Williams. 2 weeks later, 3 members of the Yang family were killed during a robbery of their Los Angeles motel. The killer used the same shotgun. Williams was convicted of all 4 murders and sentenced to die. But during his 20-plus years in prison, Williams claims to have seen the error in his ways. Although never confessing to the killings or giving police information about the Crips, Williams began to publicly denounce the gang life. He wrote a series of books for children about the evils of gangs and has, multiple times, been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. It is because of his work promoting peace that many have rallied to his cause, saying Stanley Williams can do more for society alive than dead.
Survival is why we were here.
Actor Jamie Foxx starred in a television movie about Williams' life and has come to San Quentin trying to save him.
Right now, we can still be positive.
You should be given forgiveness for redeeming yourself.
Rapper Snoop Dogg, a former Crips member himself, says he followed Williams' teachings and turned his life around. For all that has changed, though, one thing has not. Those 4 people are still dead.
Does the system mean that after you're convicted,
They say that you're guilty, that through a PR campaign, you then can reverse that?
Laura Owens was Albert Owens' stepmother.
I think he's a cold-blooded killer. I think he's manipulating, has been, all of his life.
All his court appeals used up, on December 8th, Williams' lawyers were given one last chance to save his life. A half hour in front of Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger to plead their case. The prosecution was there as well and gave their side of the story too. In the end, the fate of one man rested squarely in the hands of another. And that man decided today at 12:30 Pacific time to deny the appeal for clemency. As we had just reported a few moments ago, Williams' lawyer had asked the governor to reconsider that decision. He will not. Reporting live from Sacramento, Garvin Thomas, NBC 11 News.
The Williams execution is also
hour ticking away. Next on Eyewitness News, Crips co-founder and convicted killer Stanley Williams set to die at San Quentin in 61 minutes. Tonight, the traditional offer that Williams rejected, how he is spending his final minutes instead. New information tonight about a 90-year-old woman murdered in her home. She was also sexually assaulted. What neighbors saw on her porch that made them very suspicious. And it's not something the president usually talks about. What he said about Iraqi civilian casualties. The clarification the White House quickly issued. CBS 5 Eyewitness News starts right now. Good evening, I'm Ken Bastida.
I'm Dana King. 26 years after he killed 4 people, tonight, in 1 hour, the state will kill Stanley Tookie Williams. The murders happened in 1979. First, a 7-Eleven clerk in Whittier, and then a couple and their daughter in an LA motel. Ever since 1981, when a judge sentenced him to death, Williams has been in San Quentin on death row.
Today, one by one, all of Williams' last hopes to stay alive turned him down. Around noon, a federal appeals court rejected a stay of execution. Then a half hour later, Governor Schwarzenegger denied clemency. And then at 6:30, the U.S. Supreme Court refused to block his execution.
As you might imagine, a lot is going on at San Quentin, both inside and outside the prison. Juliette Goodrich is there, and she heads up our coverage tonight. Juliette.
Well, Dana, we're outside the east gate of San Quentin, and you might be able to see all of the people behind me. There are hundreds of demonstrators. I'll move out of the way, and you can see just a sea of people. There are signs, candles. You can't even see the gates to the prison itself because there are so many people. All of them here tonight protesting the death of Stanley Tookie Williams. They started arriving in large groups earlier this evening, and at one point, the crowd got unruly. This scuffle broke out between 2 groups of demonstrators. It just shows the level of emotion out here tonight. But barring any last-minute legal surprises, Williams will die by lethal injection. Many here tonight are upset with Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger for not granting clemency.
Discussed it with Governor Schwarzenegger and his decision. His decision is political. A wise man once said the death penalty is about 3 things: politics, politics, and politics. And what we've seen today is that Governor Schwarzenegger is another cowardly politician.
In our exclusive Eyewitness News poll, a statewide poll taken late this afternoon, 63% polled think it was right to deny clemency. But obviously from the sights and sounds outside of the prison gates here, quite a different story. I'll be covering all of the activity outside of San Quentin, but inside we're going to be going live to Manny Ramos, who has the latest on the final hours of Stanley Tookie Williams. Manny.
Well, Stanley Tookie Williams is all alone right now, Juliette. He has refused the company of a spiritual advisor. Now, behind me, you can see a red light. Right below that is the death chamber. Williams is described as being quiet, thoughtful, and being very courteous to the staff. Williams is now sitting right next to the death chamber. The creator of the Crips spent the day in a conference room, eating snacks and talking with a rotating group of 8 visitors. Is he scared?
I don't think so. I think there's an anxiety, even a fear, but it's not a paralyzing fear. He has faced the shadows of death times before.
At 6 tonight, he was moved to the death watch cell. He did not request a last meal. Instead, he's been sipping milk and maybe trying to keep his mind off of midnight.
He has been watching television. He has received the last bundle of letters that came in the mail today. Most of the letters were from people just expressing their thoughts to him, offering spiritual encouragement, letting them know that they were praying for him. The letters were not necessarily from his supporters, but from people who just wanted to pass along that spiritual guidance to him.
At 11:45, the first witnesses, about 40 of them, will be allowed into the death chamber. 10 minutes later, the 17 media witnesses will be seated. At midnight, 1 minute before the execution, the governor, the Supreme Court, and the warden are all called to make sure there is no last-minute reprieve. At 12:01, Williams is strapped on the table. Williams has asked that 5 people close to him be his personal witnesses and watch him die. Now, 5 family members of the victims are also on the witness list. We are told that Williams said goodbye to his visitors at 6 p.m. tonight. We are told, Juliet, that there were some tears and that some people were very angry.
You know, Manny, in past executions that you and I have both covered, this crowd certainly hasn't been this big. There are hundreds of people out here tonight. I'm just wondering, in the research you've done on the Williams case, why he has such drawing power, why people are so passionate about him.
Well, he is definitely a high-profile person here, Juliet, probably the most high-profile person executed at San Quentin. As a matter of fact, the Department of Corrections told me more than 9 months ago that they expected a huge crowd out here because of all the books, obviously, and of the movie. Also, the people around him, his supporters, have been very vocal and have been able to be talking. They've been getting on the media as much as possible, Juliet, in the past year.
All right, Manny Ramos from inside prison grounds. Thank you, Manny. Well, I can tell you that this crowd does continue to grow, although it is quite peaceful right now. Let's go now to why Governor Schwarzenegger denied clemency. 2 words: personal redemption. That was at the heart of the matter. In his written denial, the governor notes Williams never owned up to his crimes or showed any real remorse for murders carried out by the Crips. That's the gang he co-founded. He writes, without an apology and atonement for these senseless and brutal killings, there can be no redemption. Here's CBS 5 legal analyst LaDoris Cordell.
Read this decision. This wasn't even a close call for the governor. And it almost as if he granted the hearing this case, and he didn't have to make a statement and to set the standard for how he's going to consider clemency requests when they come to him. And his first criteria is you must apologize for the crime, even if you're innocent.
The governor reinforced the proof of Williams' guilt was strong and compelling. He also said Williams' anti-gang messages haven't had any effect on the pervasiveness of gang violence in crime-ridden neighborhoods. Obviously, you would get a differing opinion out here outside the gates of San Quentin tonight. We're going to have continuing coverage. I'll be out here all night long. Manny Ramos inside. We're also going to have streaming video on our website. You can log on to CBS5.com and get the latest on the developments here. Again, at 12:01, Stanley Tookie Williams is expected to die by lethal injection. At 12:25, there's expected to be confirmation if all goes as planned. And then witnesses will speak at 1 in the morning. All of this on our website, CBS5.com. So for now, I'll bring it back to you, Dana, outside prison gates at San Quentin.
Juliet Goodrich, thank you very much. Now, after Williams, California plans to execute its next condemned inmate on January 17th. At the age of 75, Clarence Ray Allen is the oldest man on San Quentin's death row. Allen was convicted of hiring a hitman to murder 3 people while he was behind bars. Allen is legally blind, confined to a wheelchair, and recently had a heart attack. Defense lawyers will likely focus their clemency campaign on his age and poor health.
Also in the news tonight, we learned some new details about the weekend.
Williams is scheduled to always on CBS5.com. There will be a news conference shortly after the execution, probably about 1 a.m., with people who watched it all happen. We will stream that news conference live on CBS5.com.
In the meantime, stay up with us. David Letterman's coming up.
And then there will be 2 lines put into his arm. One will be used for the actual execution. The other is a backup in case there is a problem. They will administer 3 different injections, and in between each one, saline will be run through the lines to clear the lines. The first one will be more or less a sedative to put the inmate to sleep. The second one will be a paralyzing of the diaphragm and the lungs. Essentially, it stops the inmate from breathing. And then finally, the last injection stops the heart. Now, the inmate, when he goes into the gas chamber, has a series of monitors strapped to him, and it's through those monitors that a doctor outside of the chamber itself will be monitoring his heart rate to see when his heart stops. And then it will be declared that he is dead. And then the media and the other official witnesses, as we say, they are on the other side of this octagonal execution chamber that you've all seen pictures of, the green kind of chamber. And they will be escorted out of the chamber. The media witnesses will walk behind me here. We'll actually see them when they come back. They will go into a room up to a stage, and it is there. We're in groups of 6. There are 17 witnesses. They will begin talking about what they saw. And again, they are the official eyes and ears of the public for a state execution. Now, that's what we can expect here. With a lethal injection, it's probably from start to finish. By the time they get back here, we're probably talking about 12:20, 12:25 before we actually get the word that he has been executed. Then after the official media witnesses speak, the warden here at San Quentin will speak, and he will tell us if there were any last words. The warden is in the execution chamber with the inmate, and I know when I was there with David Mason, the warden bent down and asked him if he had any final words. They were whispered to the warden. You've got to remember that there's a thick glass outside of the execution chamber, and you really, as witnesses, at least we could not hear what the inmate said before he was killed. And that is what the warden communicates to you. Now, all we know about what has happened tonight with Stanley Williams, we know that he had the only meal today was oatmeal for breakfast at 7:45 this morning. He could have had a last meal of anything. He asked not to have anything to eat. He did drink milk and water throughout the evening. He was moved into a cell next to the death chamber at 6 o'clock tonight. And then just shortly, about the time the media witnesses left here, about 11:30, he was moved outside of the actual death chamber and moved into it as the witnesses were in place. He was given a bunch of mail that arrived for him today from all over the world, we're told. Some of it from school children, some of it from his supporters, and some from those who wanted him to die. He was given this in the cell next to the death chamber tonight, and we were told by one of the spokespeople here that he chose not to open any of the mail. There was a television set in his cell for the duration of the evening. After he said his last goodbyes to 6 of his official visitors that were with him until 6, we were told that there were some tears and some anger from his visitors. And then Tookie Williams said goodbye, and then he has been only with, since 6 o'clock tonight, only with members or staff people from the Department of Corrections. He has had no one else with him. He could have had a chaplain from the prison. He apparently declined that, at least that's what we were told lastly. He told in an interview recently that he thought it would, quote, be disgusting to have any of his friends or family with him to be viewing the execution tonight. A condemned inmate is given 5 witnesses. However, we are told this evening he changed his mind, and he did ask that 5 people close to him, and the prison will not reveal who those people are. They'll have to tell us themselves. He asked them to be his official witnesses. They are inside there now, as well as 5 witnesses is the maximum that's allowed from the victim's side. So they're all intermingling in there on one side of the gas chamber, or the execution chamber as they call it now, and the media witnesses are on the other side. When we were in there, you can see some of the other witnesses on the other side of the glass, but you are not actually next to them. And again, that is what is going on right now. We assume that the execution indeed has begun. We will not get word that it has been completed until the media witnesses arrive here sometime, and probably in the next 10 minutes or so. That's what's happening here inside.
All right, Rita, thank you very much. 50 people are allowed in to sit into those risers as they wait, and he is probably on the gurney as we speak right now. 17 of those, as Rita mentioned, are the press, but sitting down on the very front row will be the families of those that Tookie Williams was convicted of murdering. She also mentioned that there were 3 drugs. Sodium pentothal is the first drug, for those of you that are interested. 5 grams are administered to put him to sleep. The lines are then flushed, as she said, with saline solution. The second one is 50 cc's of pancuronium bromide. That stops his breathing. Those lines are flushed again. The third plunger is 50 cc's of potassium chloride to stop his heart. Now, as we await word from San Quentin, a bit of perspective, 51-year-old Stanley Tookie Williams would be the 12th person to be executed in California since the state legislature reinstated the death penalty in 1977. Williams and a friend co-founded the Crip Street Gang in Los Angeles in the early 70s. In the late 70s, Williams was arrested for murder, and in 1981, a jury convicted him of 4 killings. They included a 26-year-old convenience store clerk and a husband, wife, and daughter at a Los Angeles motel. All of those murders occurred during the robberies. Williams has maintained that he is innocent of these crimes the entire time he has been in prison, which has been for 2 decades now, but he could not get a court to throw out his conviction. He could not get them to reduce his sentence. While on death row, he wrote several children's books urging young people to stay away from gangs. He was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize and literature prizes, many of them. But in the end, none of that impressed the governor or the courts. The governor denied clemency, and the courts turned down each legal appeal.
The chain of events leading up to tonight's execution unfolded quite rapidly in the past 12 hours. The first major development came at about noon when the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in San Francisco denied Williams' request for a stay. A 3-judge panel said there was no clear and convincing evidence that Williams was innocent. And then just a short while later, Governor Schwarzenegger turned down Williams' request for clemency. You recall the governor held a 1-hour hearing on just several days ago, with each side being given 30 minutes to present their case. One side for clemency, the other side for the execution to go forward. The governor said Williams' continuing insistence that he didn't commit the 4 killings for which he was convicted made him question if Williams had really reformed. The governor wrote, and I'm quoting, "Without an apology and atonement for these senseless and brutal killings, there can be no redemption." Excuse me. Then at about 6:30 this evening, the U.S. Supreme Court turned down Williams' final court appeal. The justice has made no comment in rejecting Williams' request for a stay. Williams' lawyers then made a final appeal to the governor. They sent the governor a letter saying that they had new sources, new witnesses who had come forward who could help prove Williams' innocence. They asked the governor to stay the execution for 60 days so they could have time to check out those appeals. The governor acknowledged getting that letter, getting the appeal from the lawyers. He turned down all of those appeals.
Now, one of the things that we keep hearing about is the word redemption. That was the name of the movie that was made regarding Tookie Williams. And redemption, according to the governor and what the governor wrote today, and I'm paraphrasing now, includes asking for forgiveness. And since Tookie Williams never admitted that he killed 4 people, redemption, in the governor's words, was not an option. Over the past several weeks, Williams has given several interviews to different media outlets. In an interview with the New York Times conducted 2 weeks ago, he was asked about the prospect of his execution. He said, "I will go through it. I'll go through it with dignity and integrity, with love and bliss in my heart. I smile at everything, and I'm quite sure I'll smile then, too. I smile to myself, and I don't worry about it."
Now, excuse me, I wonder if we can go back out to Rita Williams, and I'd like to ask her a couple of questions if my producers can get Rita up. Rita, if you recall, now you explained the process that's going on right now, that probably it is underway. But you recall, I think it was about 12 or 13 years ago, I believe it was Robert Alton Harris, where this whole process got disrupted in a very prolonged way. Am I correct? Was that, Harris, where it went on into the night and until 6 o'clock the next morning? He kept getting appeals, and the courts would stay the execution, and finally it was 6 or so the next morning before anything happened.
You're absolutely correct, Dennis. That was Robert Alton Harris, who was the first one executed. That was by lethal gas here at San Quentin after the 25-year moratorium, more or less, where there were no executions. And that went sort of back and forth. He would get a stay, then another court would turn it down, or an en banc hearing would be held, or whatever. And so it bounced back and forth. I was out here and with his attorneys that night in San Francisco for part of the evening. They would go from joy to complete utter sadness, that it would bounce back and forth. And it was, as I recall, dawn was breaking here when he finally was put to death. And let me explain that, Dennis, because when a death warrant is issued by a judge, it is issued for a certain day. And as we know, the death warrant here for Stanley Williams is for today, Tuesday. And that is a 24-hour period. So he could be executed at any point in those 24 hours. So let's say, I mean, we don't think that that is occurring now, but let's say that there were a stay going on right now. That could continue back and forth, a stay, and then it could be lifted, and then there could be another stay, and he could still be executed within the next 24 hours as long as it is indeed today. Now, if it turns out it goes on until Wednesday, then he would not be executed. If it makes it till midnight Tuesday night or tonight, then that death warrant is no longer valid, and he would have to go back to court and be rescheduled for an execution. But you're right, it was Robert Alton Harris.
We don't expect anything like that to be going on tonight, though, of course.
Well,
his final appeal was turned down by the governor, as far as we know.
Correct, and we're not hearing of anything else. As you recall, that was the first one after 25 years, and there was a lot of activity to keep California from starting again with its executions. So there were a lot of legal challenges to that. I think most of these have been exhausted. I'm quite sure that what is happening now is indeed an execution in the death chamber right now.
Okay. Earlier, one more quick question, Rita. We heard that, of course, it was reported earlier that there was a witness that came forward and said that he could prove that Tookie Williams was innocent, and there were some last-minute rushes to get that information to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Do you know anything about that?
Leslie, I don't know details. I've been inside here all evening except what I've been hearing, but I will tell you that that has happened on other executions that I've covered, that there's a last-minute witness who comes forward or piece of evidence. And I'll tell you that the courts usually do not figure that that is any reason to stay in execution, that they figure that, as we know in Stanley Williams' case, he's been on death row now for, is it 24 or 25 years, and that there's been a lot of time for a witness to come forward. And they usually do not grant those.
Okay, and we want to reconfirm that the governor has turned this down twice and has said no twice.
That's correct.
We want to now go back out to Ken Wayne. Ken is out in front where the crowd, some between. What are they doing now?
Well, some people have started to leave, Dennis, and we just heard a bit of a roar and some applause come up from the gate area, the east gate at the end of San Quentin Village, just before you actually enter prison property. We're too far away to tell what that small applause was for. Could be something that was said on stage. They have a stage down there. There have been a number of speakers and musicians performing all night long, and perhaps somebody said something to try to encourage the crowd, because prior to this small burst of applause, it's been pretty quiet out here. The only noise is from the Highway Patrol helicopter that's been flying over, shining a searchlight down onto the crowd here. As I said, there are believed to be between 1,500 and 2,000 people, according to the sergeant from the CHP. A lot of people here from all over the Bay Area, and some people from the East Coast that I've talked to tonight. This woman here is from the Montclair neighborhood in Oakland. Tell me why you came out here tonight.
Basically to just have and show peaceful support for Tookie Williams, and to hopefully show the governor that people of California care about this issue, and we don't believe in the death penalty.
What's going through your mind right now? Because in all probability, the execution is being carried out as we speak.
It's a sad day in California, for sure. I think that this whole thing, I'm very grateful that the media has given it such attention, especially in the hip-hop community. They have definitely reached out to the youth and the young people, and I think that this just shows the younger generation how important it is to choose our leaders wisely and to make sure that we have people in office that are going to actually represent us and our communities.
Sir, do you think this execution is going to mean anything to the African-American community?
Oh, yeah, it definitely is. I mean, Arnold needs to know that this is not Texas. You know, we here in California, we don't support the death penalty like that. You know, would he go to Austria and execute some of his people like this? I mean, this is ridiculous. This is crazy. I mean, and all the support, you see all these people out here. I mean, there's about 10,000 people or so out here. And I thought it was going to be a small crowd out here. And I'm just happy that all the support came out here for this man. You know, I didn't know this man, you know, and I feel for the victims too, but, you know, we didn't support their death neither. And we definitely don't support, as Californians, I don't think that we as a whole support this.
I noticed that you brought, I take it this is your son?
Yeah, it's my son, Hardell.
Okay, has he read any of the children's books that Tookie Williams has written, or have you talked to him about it?
No, but I'm pretty sure he's going to be interested. He's definitely going to ask me about it.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right.
There are, as I mentioned earlier, there are tables set up, people trying to gather signatures, petitions, people to sign up on various organizations that oppose the death penalty. So there's that kind of activity here. There are small musical ensembles spread out around the street here, people on guitars. One person was playing a saxophone earlier. At times there was a little bit of a festival kind of atmosphere. There was a gentleman walking through here with a big backpack on with hot chocolate that he was selling to people. So it's a wide variety of things that are happening, but for the most part everyone is united against the death penalty, and they're out here trying to do what they can, at least show some support about how they feel about capital punishment. Dennis, Leslie?
Okay, Ken, we'll check back with you in a bit. Now, as we mentioned, as Rita said, as Leslie mentioned, there is a process that is under.
And then the chemicals at lethal doses will be administered. The first chemical induces unconsciousness. The second chemical stops the breathing. The third chemical stops the heart. Many of the staff are working very long, very hard. They're being very professional, and they carry this out with not only professionalism, knowing that they are carrying out a lawful court order, but they do it with dignity and with solemnity as well.
Rita Williams standing here, and I just wanted to mention that it doesn't matter how you feel about the death penalty. Being a witness to an execution is a very sobering experience. As I said, I watched David Mason be executed, and that was in 1993, and after that, the gas chamber was ruled to be cruel and unusual punishment, and so there has not been one since then. It took him some 20 minutes or more to die, thrashing about, and it was very difficult to watch, I will say, regardless of how you might feel about the death penalty. This, of course, is lethal injection, and when reporters started watching lethal injections, I think the first one was in 1996, it was reporters came in, or the official witnesses, and the curtains were drawn inside the death chamber, and when they were opened, all that people saw was the person who appeared to be asleep. They couldn't tell any difference. Some of the media protested that, appealed the way it was done then, and now it is the way we saw it with a gas chamber execution, where you actually see the inmate walk in. There are guards with him, but he walks in on his own accord. We watched him sit in the gas chamber, or in a seat in this case, they go to a gurney and they actually stretch out on the gurney, and then you see them putting the IVs into their veins. Now, the last one was Beardsley here, and I understand, I was not in there, but that they had great difficulty finding his veins. It took some 10 or 15 minutes for that to happen. We, again, don't know what's going on now. A little history, do you want to, in a little history of, I did some research tonight. It turned out that in California used to be that counties actually executed within their own counties by hanging, and that occurred until 1891, when the state legislature passed a law that it would be up to the state to then carry out executions, and those were by hanging. And it was both at San Quentin here and at Folsom Prison. And then, I believe it was 1937, the legislature passed a law that lethal gas would replace hangings. And the only gas chamber that was built in the state was built here in San Quentin. And so since then, there have been gas chamber executions here. I believe there were something like, on hangings, 307 people were hanged here between San Quentin and Folsom Prison. And then in the gas chamber before the end of executions in 1967, before they were resumed 25 years later, there were some 194 people executed by gas here, and 4 of those were women. And as we said, there were no executions then for 25 years. David Mason was executed in 1993, and it was then that the courts ruled that that was cruel and unusual punishment, and since then, death has been by lethal injection.
Rita, this is Leslie. One of the things that we've been hearing from San Quentin, the officials there, was that he did never denounce the Crips as far as he worked out with them, he went out in the yard with them every day. That was a hard thing for prison officials to understand if he had denounced them. I'm wondering, is it possible when he chooses 5 people to go in there and witness this, that any of them are people from inside the prison, his friends?
No, Leslie, I know that that is not the case. The people that he requested were already on his official list of visitors, so they were among the 6 people that he had been visiting with today. I know some of the visitors that were with him today were Jesse Jackson, were his spokeswoman that he did his books with from the East Bay. These were people that were pre-approved for him to visit with here on his last day. So no, there is absolutely no way that any inmate in San Quentin is allowed to view an execution.
Now, Rita, when you were a witness and you were kept inside the prison, we understand it takes about 10 minutes for the convicted person to actually pass on. How long did they keep you there after that? How long can we expect the reporters inside to be inside? Is it just anybody's guess, or?
Well, Leslie, again, mine was the last gas chamber execution, and it takes much longer to die by gas than it does by lethal injection. But you have to remember the procedure that the inmate, as I understand it today with lethal injection, is not brought into the chamber until midnight, until his death warrant. It is now the day of the death warrant, so they don't bring him in until midnight. He has to walk in. He has to be strapped into the gurney. The IVs have to be started. That takes a while. So even though it might take some average of 10 minutes before he's pronounced dead, those steps take some time. And then the witnesses are escorted out. They go back into that building I showed you behind me. At least we did when we were witnesses. And then you walk. They had a bus to take you down there, but you walk the distance. I'm not sure if Steve can show behind me, but back where the tower or the lights are. So I assume they're walking tonight. You walk around this curve, and so that took another 5 minutes or so for us to walk back. The thing I remember being struck with was it's quiet inside the chamber. You're left with your thoughts. You're taking your notes to be an official witness. You haven't really thought about what you're going to say. You walk outside and you're hit with this burst of cold air. kind of a reality check, and you walk back down here. I remembered thinking, oh gosh, I hope nobody asked me what I just saw. And a friend from the LA Times, when we were in the first group brought out, asked me right away, Rita, what was it like? So the very first person, the first words that were spoken about what we had seen, I was the one that spoke. And you know, again, it's a very sobering experience. You are an official witness for the state of California, for the public. And we had taken notes as to what time the execution actually began, what time it was deemed to be over. I understand they've made a lot of changes since we were there then in 1993. But even though it may not take the condemned man longer than maybe 10 minutes to actually be pronounced dead, the actual procedure is going to take a lot longer. So I think that's what we're experiencing now.
Now, Rita, toward the ends of it, looks like the crowd is thinning out a bit.
We've seen some people leaving here, Dennis, heading away from the East Gate back towards the main road that leads out of the San Quentin Village area. But there are still quite a few people here. Protest capital punishment. How did it turn out from your point of view?
Well, you know, to bring this amount of people together is incredibly multiracial, movement of all different ages. You know, is a great thing that we haven't seen around the fight to end the death penalty in a long time. You know,
I'm wondering why you think there are so many more that turned out tonight versus previous executions. Robert Alton Harris was the first one in 25 years, so there's a lot of people out here. I was out here for that one in 1992, and I remember there's a big crowd like this, but then in subsequent executions, the numbers dwindled quite a bit, but tonight we have another large turnout. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because of what Stanley Tookie Williams means to people. You know, this man means that people can change. You know, that young black men and women can move out and struggle against you know, the odds that are placed against them. You know, and he's a beacon of hope to many people in this state and around the world.
Do you think these protests are effective in any way?
Yes, I do. I think that the only way that we ever get progressive change in this society is through struggle and through bringing people together. Frederick Douglass had to say about John Brown, the man who led an unsuccessful revolt against the South, right, the abolitionist, right?
I have to break it off here because I think we might be getting some news about what's going on, so let's go over to Rita Williams inside the prison. Rita?
Ken, we've just been notified that the official time of death is 12:36. An official just came out and told us that the execution is over, that Stanley Tookie Williams died at 12:36, and we are now waiting for media witnesses to come back and to give more description. But they have told us now that it is over. It's a representative from the Department of Corrections here. That throng of reporters that you saw on the steps earlier, someone just came out and had gotten word by radio from as they left the execution chamber that he was pronounced dead at 12:36.
And no description of what actually happened during the death. Did he was quoted as saying he was going to be smiling as he was leaving.
Leslie, we will not get any of those details until the witnesses return. Right now, all we were told is that it is over and the time of death.
Okay, let's go back out to Ken and see if he can finish the interviews that he was doing while we wait for the reporters to come out and fill us in on what went on. Ken?
Well, let me finish up real quick with what we were talking about. We just got information that the official time of death was 12:36, so that was just 3 or 4 minutes ago. I'm wondering what your reaction to that is.
So we may have not saved Tookie's life, but hopefully we can use his memory as part of a fight to end the death penalty in the state and in the country. There's going to be a rally on the steps of San Francisco City Hall tomorrow at 4 o'clock to continue this fight, and hopefully this movement will be around and will continue and thrive.
Do you have any thoughts about this? You were out here all night. It wasn't that cold, but still, it was. You know, it's a long drive, and there's no place to park. You got to hike in here. It's really a long night and a lot of trouble for a lot of people to come out here. And in the end, he was executed anyway. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about that.
Well, we're the only industrialized nation that still executes our own. It's disgusting. you know,
And you still come out here.
I'm here.
I mean, I guess the question is why? If you know that you're going to come out here and the execution happens.
I mean, why would you, you know, it's better than staying on my couch and being angry, you know. I'm here. I'm one of 1,500. Is that the number? I'm here.
Thank you very much. Dennis and Leslie, we had a small cluster of people that are gathered around over here. It's kind of hard to see through the people. They had candles lit just a few minutes ago. And it's hard to see if the candles are still lit, but they're down on their knees, holding hands. They've been praying, and those kinds of scenes are scattered around this street, up and down from the gate all the way out back towards the highway that leads to the Richmond Bridge. So that's what's happening here. Let's check in with Rita Williams inside the prison. Rita?
Ken, as we told you, the execution is over. The time of death was 12:36. The only additional information that we have is you can see behind me, whereas I told you we walked back down here to the media center. Steve, if you can pan over here, you can see the shuttle bus is arriving. These are the media witnesses that have just watched the execution. They are going to be unloaded here. They will go back inside, and inside they will start giving us descriptions of what actually occurred during the execution. Again, you will see them coming out here. Those are Department of Corrections folks. Now we're seeing the media witnesses. There are 17 media witnesses. They drew straws. Back when I was a media witness, somebody just tapped me and said, "You're first." But tonight they do it very differently. They drew straws for who is going to be in the first group of 6, and they will go to the podium inside where there is a pool camera, and as much as we would like to talk to them right now, they have been told that they cannot talk individually because they are official witnesses for the state. So everyone will hear at the same time when they get to the podium with a pool camera. You will be able to hear what they saw inside during the execution. Now, you'll be able to hear that. Where I am right now, I cannot hear that. So someone there will have to tell me when they start speaking. But they have now gone inside. We expect any minute now to start hearing the descriptions of what happened.
Okay, Rita, this probably is bringing back very vivid memories from when you were with...
Questions at the conclusion of each of their statements.
Here come the reporters now, as you can see. They're walking up to the podium. And as Dennis was saying, there are 6 of them first, and they're going to give us their collective view of what happened. It will be interesting to see the effect that it had on them watching this, and whether or not it went smoothly or not.
Yourselves first, and your affiliation. Would you start at the end, please, first?
Steve Lopez, Los Angeles Times. Pardon? Steve Lopez, Lopez.
John Simmerman, Contra Costa Times, Simerman, John with an H.
I'm Kevin Fagan with the San Francisco Chronicle. That's Kevin Fagan.
I'm Tony Lopez, Lopez, with CBS 13 and UPN 31 in Sacramento.
Kim Curtis with the Associated Press, Curtis, Curtis.
Brian Rooney with ABC News. That's Brian. Last name Rooney.
Well, you have somewhat obstructed views, and we were discussing on the way back who saw and who heard what. So I think you might get something slightly different from each of us. He came in without any kind of resistance. Shortly after 12, it seemed, he was helped onto what I guess is a converted dentist chair and was strapped down, and at no point did he seem to give any kind of resistance whatsoever. He did while they were tapping his veins, lift his head several times to look around at people. He seemed, for the most part, to be looking over to a section where there appeared to be some of his supporters. At one point, he looked directly over at us. It was hard to see if he was just looking at the press in general or anybody in particular. And he was declared dead at 12:35.
They had some trouble with the second IV, which was in the left arm. It took them, it may have been 10 minutes to deal with that. Williams at one point grimaced, or it looked almost out of frustration or at the difficulty there. It took till 12:22 thereabouts before a female guard gave the announcement that the execution would begin. So there's a 13 or 14 minute actual execution, the first part of which he was lifting his head, and then it fell again down to the, I guess you call it a pad. Did that a few times, breathing pretty heavily, and then you would see sort of a rise in sort of his stomach area up and down a few times, or more than a few times, I guess. And then after a few minutes, his breathing slowed, and then you didn't see anything for several minutes, and everybody was sort of attentive, watching this lifeless body. And I'll just turn it over to Kevin.
Well, this is the sixth one I've seen here at San Quentin, and I have to say this was very different. There were the most notable thing was that Williams had supporters at the back of the room. Ms. Becknell was among them, I understand. We could see them, and throughout the last part of the or preparing him, when he was still conscious, they gave what looked like Black Power salutes several times to him, one man and two women. And most strikingly at the end of the execution, as those three were heading out, they yelled, the state of California just killed an innocent man, which is the first time I've ever heard any outburst in the death chamber there. And the folks who were there on behalf of the victims, they were stony. They're very impassive. But at the very end, when those three yelled that out, Dora Owens, the stepmom of one of his victims, began to cry. Yeah, Laura. I'm sorry, Laura. And that was different. That was a very emotional element of this particular execution.
I had a good look at the Williams supporters, other than raising their fists in the air. At times, they blew kisses to him. They said, they whispered, they worded, "I love you, God bless you." Stanley Williams was speaking a lot throughout this process. We don't know what he was saying. His head was tilted to the left where his contingent was, and he was talking a lot, it appeared. Mostly, he talked about the victim's stepmother, Ms. Owens, and not until the very end did she show any sort of emotion. She was looking just straight at Williams the entire time, did not move whatsoever. But the Williams contingent did move around a lot, and as was said, they had that outburst at the end as they left the room.
I had an extremely obstructed view, so I don't have a lot to add, other than it seemed to me that it was taking much longer than Williams thought it would. He kept lifting his head, shaking his head, putting it back down, almost as if it seemed like disgust to me and frustration. And I thought he said, I don't know if anyone else heard this, but "You doing that right?" Did anyone hear that but me?
It was very hard to hear in there. The fact that the glass is super thick.
I was struck by two things. I was struck by what a personal process it was, and that all the people attending to him had their hands on him most of the time. One guard near the right side of his head in particular was touching his upper arm a lot of the time, I think in an effort to comfort him. There was a lot of quite a bit of talking. Tookie would talk to the people attending, and at times they spoke back to him. He lifted his head a lot, looked around. I was struck by how long it took. It was at least 22 minutes from when he entered the room to when they read the death warrant. There was just an awful lot of sticking needles and taping things down, and he raised his head several times and spoke to them. He looked exasperated at the length of the process of doing this. And by my watch, it was 36 minutes and 15 seconds from when he walked in the room alive to when they declared him dead.
Okay, we've heard from the first 6 media witnesses who...
All out, the questions begin about civil liberties and privacy and the protection of all of us. We begin here tonight.